Hello everybody, welcome back to the Fremont Debate Academy, and today we're going to be talking about body language. So from this very short meme or GIF, if that's how you say it, I can never understand. Stupid. Hello everybody, welcome back to the Fremont Debate Academy, and today we're going to be talking about body language. So from this picture or GIF, I hope that's how you say it, we can see that Sabrina over here is that one friend. She's not saying anything, but we can very clearly tell from the way she's standing, from her from her hand movements, from her face. She's not feeling very happy. And so body language is a really important part of giving a presentation. And I actually always like to include this statistic where 60 to 65% of communication is through body language. So it's really important that you have good body language when you're speaking, because it will make you a more effective speaker and presenter. And it can also help you have, or at least show your audience you have confidence, even if you don't feel it. So first, I'm actually going to start off with what you shouldn't do in a speech in relation to body language. Don't slouch, because when you slouch, your body kind of faces inwards, and when you're facing inwards, it seems like you're more nervous, and it feels like you're not open towards the audience, which makes it harder for you to connect with them. It's the same thing with keeping your head down and reading your note card. First of all, reading your note card makes you seem nervous and unprepared. And having your head down not only makes you seem nervous, but when you have your head down, your voice projects to the ground. So it's like you're not even talking to the audience. It actually makes it harder for them to hear you. It can even sound like you're mumbling sometimes. So make sure you keep your head up. In addition, don't have your hands in your pockets. That will make you seem really nervous, as well as crossing your hands. Crossing your hands is, again, another way in which you kind of close your body off to the audience. And I'll talk about in the next slide what exactly open to the audience is and why it's important. So don't cross your hands, it closes you off. And touching your face is also really important. It makes you seem nervous. It's like a very clear indication, especially like girls, like don't twirl your hair. Again, try not to touch your face. And don't turn away from your audience. I know I've heard that if you've ever like done a play or like been on stage before and you've had like someone tell you, I'm sure you've heard it, that they always say you should face your audience. It's the same thing when you're speaking to them. You should like face them. So make sure you're not turning away, like turning to the side. And it's kind of the same thing as slouching. When you're slouching, you're almost turning away from your audience because you're turning inwards instead of outwards towards them. So what should you actually be doing? Standing open. And if you're an athlete, that's like, I like to call it open stance, and it's having your feet shoulder width apart, chin up, head up, shoulders back, chest out. And I really like to call this the power pose. I think it's a lot more fun to think of it like that, because standing correctly will make you seem a lot more confident. So like a really quick thing is like here, I'm slouching, my head is down, I don't seem as confident, I can seem nervous, I seem smaller. But when I kind of have my head up, my chin up, my back is straight, I seem a lot more powerful, confident, and ready to give a really good speech. And the right posture shows a lot of confidence, and it's a really good way to connect with your audience. Now, when I was talking earlier about kind of being open to your audience, because I'm straight, my whole body is kind of facing forward. It's facing towards the audience, towards you. And so this makes it easier for me to connect with you because, I'm facing you. And so that's why it's really important that you face outwards and towards your audience. So I also wanted to talk about hand movements. Standing isn't the only important thing. For beginners, I would tell you keep them in front of you or the side, and don't get nervous and fidget with like your jacket or your pants. That's a really clear indication that you're nervous. So if you don't know what to do and you're like kind of scared, just keep them by your sides. And if you are talking, keep them in front of you. And if you're using your hands, make sure you keep them in front of you. And so, your hands are really, really powerful tools. You can use them to emphasize a point. Like right now, I'm saying I'm using my hands to emphasize a point, right? My hands help a reader distinguish, not a reader, an audience member distinguish when you're trying to say something important. But you have to be really careful not to use your hands way too much because it can be really, really distracting. So be really careful about how much you use hand movements. Great way to figure that out is to practice. Look at yourself in a mirror when you're presenting. Enlist a friend or a family member to watch you and get feedback, as well as watching speeches on YouTube. That's a great way to kind of see and watch famous speakers, presidents, watch how they stand, watch their hand movements. It's a great way to learn. In addition, smile, smile, smile. If you haven't noticed, I try and at least start my presentations with a smile because it's a great way to just connect with your audience right off the bat. Of course, I'm not telling you have to smile through your whole presentation. That can be kind of hard to do, especially if you're talking about a serious topic, but at least try and start off with a smile. It's a great way to kind of connect. It makes you seem more approachable, more open to your audience, and it shows them you're trying to engage with them, which is super important because they want to feel important. And by smiling at them, you're connecting with them and making them feel important, which in turn will help you persuade them or get your point across, which makes you a better speaker. Another really important part of body language is eye contact. I would say this is by far one of the hardest parts of body language, and so we're actually going to start with the purpose of why eye contact is so important. First, eye contact helps you connect with your audience. It builds a personal connection with them. When you look at them, you're talking to them one-on-one. It can make a really big impact on someone who's listening to you because if it seems like you're talking directly to them, they're more likely to listen as well as feel engaged. I always like to give a really crazy example. If you were at an Ariana Grande concert and she was speaking and then she looked at you as you were speaking, you'd be like, oh my God, Ariana Grande looked at me. And so it's the same thing when you're speaking, even if you're not Ariana Grande. I hope you get the analogy that an audience member can feel really important when you look at them. In addition, eye contact helps you project authority and confidence. If someone looked at me dead in the eyes while they were speaking, I would definitely think that they were confident and that they had authority because it's a really scary thing to do. Again, it also helps you engage your audience. It kind of helps you connect with them. It shows them that you are trying to include them in their speech, even if they can't physically or say something and interact with you. And eye contact is a really great way to emphasize your points. I know there's a lot of things I've been talking about how to emphasize points, and this is just another one of them. And so, you can use all these tips to emphasize different things. You don't always have to use the same thing, always use a hand gesture, or always change your tone. Well, you should change your tone, or always make eye contact with the same person. It's a different way to make an emphasis. And I always like to give the example of in a debate, if you're impacting and you're talking about about the impact your solution has on children, and you're talking to a parent judge, look at them in the eye and tell them this solution is going to help your parent, because you're going to connect with them. You're going to really drive home your point about how this solution will benefit them. And so it's a really, really great way to emphasize your point. Now, obviously, I do understand that eye contact can be difficult for people. So when I talk about the method, I'm going to be talking about if you are looking at a person in the eye and what you should do. And in the next slide, we'll cover how to kind of get to that point. So first we're going to cover the method. So how do you actually make eye contact? Yes, there's an actual kind of strategy you should follow. And I know it sounds a little silly, but it's actually really helpful because if you kind of have in your mind, what you want to do when you make the eye contact, you kind of have a plan, it can make it a lot more easier to actually do. So we're going to assume that you're going to look individual members in the eye. And what you want to do is you want to pause on them, connect with them, and then move on. So this is like, you should briefly kind of look them in the eye, maybe say a couple of sentences, maybe a sentence or two. Obviously, you should practice, do what makes you feel comfortable, but don't stare at them for too long. Your point is not to make them uncomfortable. Your point is to engage them. So if you're like staring at someone and then continuously talking, you can make them uncomfortable. So kind of figure out what works best for you, and scan the room when you're making eye contact. I always like to tell speakers that before you start your presentation, kind of look around the room really quickly, and see how the audience is actually laid out. If they're really spread out, kind of before you should have gotten up, you should have like an idea that, hey, I want to start on the right side of the room and move left, and then kind of jump around from there. Or if they're a lot smaller, kind of try and go to different people, because you want to engage as many people as possible and make everyone in the room feel like they're important and that you're speaking to them. So even if your audience isn't straight in front of you, you can always turn your body a little bit to the side and look at them to better engage them. And then prepare early. And what I mean by this is you should like practice when you're speaking, practice moving your head, practice moving your body a little bit. If you're on a stage, practice even like walking, even if it's like 2 steps to the right, practice that in your speech. It'll make doing it in the real, during the real presentation a lot easier. Practice makes eye contact easier. So, of course, I know eye contact can be difficult and not everybody is ready to look at someone they don't know in the eyes, especially when they're speaking. And so here are like a few steps to kind of get you there. First, if you're really, really shy, you can look at the wall behind your audience. But I want to tell you that whichever one of these you're using, practice moving your body, practice scanning the room, even if you're not looking at the people, because it'll kind of ingrain that motion and that way of speaking, so that when you do get to making actual eye contact with people, it'll be like second nature to you. So you can look at the wall, look at an object, talk to the object. They can be a lot less scary than people, but I would actually suggest that you start off with looking at people's foreheads or right above their head, because then it looks like you're still kind of looking at them. But of course, if you're really, really uncomfortable with making eye contact, you can start with the wall. So, the second one, the one I would suggest you start with, is looking at their forehead, right above their head. So then you don't actually have to look them in the eye. I know audiences can be unresponsive sometimes and hard to give a speech to if they don't laugh at your jokes or they're not responding the way you want. And so if it seems difficult or you're not ready, you can talk to their forehead or above their head, and that makes it easier. And then once you're comfortable with that, you can move on to making eye contact with people, especially in class presentations or when you're presenting to a group. And if you know a couple of people, I always like to start off with actually looking at them, because usually they're responsive. They'll smile at you, kind of help you go on. And I always love that because it gives me the extra confidence I need, or it helps me become more confident and kind of ready to kind of look at people I don't know. So that's how you make eye contact and how you should work up to physically making eye contact with people you don't know. We're going to talk a little bit about note cards as well. At the very beginning of the presentation, I told you not to look down and read your note cards, because it's really important that you don't. If you're reading your note cards, you seem like you're unprepared. You can seem like you're not confident, right? The point of note cards is not to kind of help you. The point of note cards is to be a tool. It shouldn't be your speech, right? You shouldn't just look at your note cards. Your speech isn't for your note cards, they're for the people you're presenting it to. And so don't write your note cards in full sentences. They should be short bullet points that are meant to jog your memory. And I always like to tell people, practice with your note cards, and practice with note cards that are exactly with the note cards you will be presenting with, because it'll make it easier for you to use them and kind of not get flustered with them. A lot of times if you haven't really looked at your note cards much and then you feel like you need them, you'll take a couple seconds and trying to find the information, or you'll try reading off of it, and that's what you don't want to do. So practice with it. You know, it's also a tool that's in your hands. So you want to practice using it. And then I would also say, this is personally for me, I found that memorizing can actually be more difficult. Obviously, everyone speaks in different ways. So I would caution you not to memorize the words on like a speech that you're giving. If you've written your speech out, unless like the whole point is to give a memorized speech, I would caution you from trying to memorize it. And the reason I say this is because when you memorize something, you're trying to repeat it word for word from how you remember it. And a lot of times, if you forget like the most simple word, you'll like restate something, or you'll stutter, or you'll like look at the ceiling or the floor, like trying to remember it, and it can fluster you even if the word you're trying to remember isn't important. And it probably isn't. One word usually doesn't make or break a speech. And so I always really caution against memorization, especially why I tell you don't put full sentences on your note cards. It's really there to help you. And I think that using note cards can help you as a speaker, like especially if you have bullet points. It makes your speaking a lot more natural if you don't memorize it. Like I haven't memorized this presentation. I'm basically talking off the top of my head, and I'm using the presentation as a guide to kind of help me remember what I should be saying. So how should your note cards actually look? They could look something like this. You should have like keywords on it if you like want to say a specific thing. Statistics are always great to have on note cards. Transitions, and make sure your items are in order so it's easy for you to distinguish of where you need to go and where you are in your speech. And again, practice with them. It'll make it much easier for you to like quickly glance at them and then continue to talk. So thank you so much for watching our YouTube video. Like and subscribe for more content.